Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Shit's Hard. I'm your host, Amber, and today we are talking about family, because Lord knows family is fucking hard. I actually haven't done an episode on this before, which is actually kind of surprising, because there's a lot to talk about here, quite a lot to unpack. But yeah, so brief summary, we're just kind of going to go over like parents, family dynamic, especially in my own circumstance, having my family like across the country from me, kind of how that has changed things, I guess. I have a very unpopular opinion about families, so we're going to get to that. We're going to dive in. And then we're also going to talk about jealousy of like other people's family relations and kind of how I feel like I've experienced that and how that ties into my life and just like how that can be a little bit of like a weird thing, I guess. But let's get into it. So, long story short, I have a very interesting relationship with my family. In general, like coming out to California, my parents were not super supportive of me doing that. If you've been listening, you know, I had that degree in architecture and I was working at a firm and I pretty much could have like secured a job out of college and like had my shit together in their eyes. And when I kind of wanted to like ditch architecture and move across the country and change career fields all at the same time, I think it was like not a bit much for them, but it just like, it was just unsure and like not very secure, I guess. And I don't know, they're just not very like outwardly enthusiastic or supportive in general, not just like about moving to California. And this is something that I've kind of like dealt with my whole life. And I want to talk about it because I don't know, for a long time, in a weird way, I feel like a little bit like embarrassed for some reason. It's like, you know, there's a lot of girls who are like best friends with their mom and I don't have that. And for a long time, I like internalized it and like was wondering like, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't she want to be best friends with me? Luckily, I kind of grew out of that in college and became my own person and realized, you know, these are the cards that I was dealt. That's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. But we're also going to talk about independence. That's something I want to talk about in regards to my parents too, because interestingly enough, like I said, like my parents, they did a lot for me, like financially. They just weren't really there for me like mentally or emotionally, I guess. Which made me, like there were some good things to come of that, if you will. Stay with me. Mm-hmm. Like this made me hyper independent. Like when I decided to move to California, I knew that I could because for the longest time, my parents made me do shit without them anyways. You know what I mean? Like they kind of taught me that like I don't need them. In a good way, I guess. Well, not in the best way. Like I said, like mentally or emotionally, I didn't feel like I had that support. But like in a very literal way, like even right now in my life, I fully know that I can take care of myself always because like that's kind of what I've been doing for a minute. So that's like a good plus to it. And I think also like to an extent, you kind of have to learn how to do things without your parents because unfortunately, like one day you will have to. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like a harsh reality, but like, it's true. And I just talked with my dad today. I'm having quite a bit of family drama right now, which I probably won't get into too much. But that's definitely what sparked the creative narrative for this episode. But we did have a conversation about like doing things for yourself and how, and taking care of yourself and that kind of thing. And also like in terms of like him being a parent and like wanting to take care of me still. You know what I mean? Like your parents always kind of like want to take care of you if they can. But yeah, so that was kind of like a tough thing was like not having their like outward like enthusiastic support. Like I think something that I've struggled with for a long time is like them never really outwardly expressing like being proud of me or like excited for me. Like even since I've been out in California, and I've said this before to many people, if you know me at all personally, like you would just be able to see it on me. I've been so much happier since I moved to California, like significantly happier, just less anxious. And I've been like figuring myself out a little bit and like exploring my identity. And it just was absolutely the right move for me at that time to get out of Ohio, to get uncomfortable and to grow a little bit. And like I said, a lot of my close friends and stuff have been like, you seem like you're having a really great time. I'm really happy for you. You know, this is an exciting thing. You're meeting new people. You're trying new things. And my parents just don't really have that approach, you know? Like since I've moved out here, they haven't been like, hey, like, I'm really proud of you for doing that hard thing. It was probably really scary. Or they haven't been like, hey, like, I'm really happy for you. You know, you seem happy and so I'm happy, that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that I need that from them. That's a sad statement. Maybe it's just that I want that from them. But obviously I've like kind of conditioned myself, like, that those aren't the cards that you were dealt. And again, it's made me like a little bit hyper independent and kind of made me realize like I can try to like fill that void in myself for myself, and I can validate myself and I can be proud of myself, and those things are good too. But the jealousy thing is really hard, especially as you grow up. And this wasn't really something that I experienced until I got to college, was really when I started, because I'm from a small ass town in the Midwest where like a lot of my friends grew up the same exact situation as me. They're in the same financial class than me. They're in the same exact like fucking, I don't know, their parents like make the same, they live in the same kind of neighborhood. They just like live the same experience. It's a small town. And so once I got to college was when I really like got other friends and kind of learned like, oh wow, like not everyone had the same childhood as me. You know, I have friends who like had to get a job at 16 to keep the fucking lights on. Like their story is just very different than mine. And it made me like really look at my parents, not differently, but just like, I don't know, because I'm appreciative for them, for everything that they gave me. And like, I never had to work to keep the lights on, you know? Like, I always had a roof over my head, always knew where every fucking meal was coming from. If you've been listening for a minute, you know, paid for my college, like, my first car. Like, obviously, I'm extremely privileged and grateful for those things that they gave me. But then as I also got to college was also when I realized the flip side of it was, like, other people's parents are very, like, just, like, all over them, just, like, very excited for them and about them. And excited to see like what they were going to do and be. And like my parents weren't like that. Like even in college, like they weren't like coming up all the time. They weren't coming to visit. They weren't like, hey, just checking in. Like you're doing so great. I'm so proud of you. Like I kind of noticed that dynamic shift as well. Which was interesting. And that was the first time that I felt like jealous of someone else's relationship with their parents, especially being a girl. Like I said earlier, a lot of girls are like best friends with their mom. They tell their mom everything. They talk to their mom every day. And so when I like had friends like that, it made me like kind of internalize it a little bit. And I was a little bit like resentful, I think. And almost like, it almost made me like when they would talk about their mom, like I think, and I caught myself on this because it's obviously you don't know you're doing it at first, but I was like a little like annoyed, you know, or like if they like had to go home for their mom's birthday, I was like, why would you do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like you're busy. Like, I don't know. I guess I was just like, why would you make time for that? Which is like, obviously a really like fucked up thing to think, but like, that's kind of how I lived and that's how my family was. So like, you know, that's just how your family dynamic is different, you know, in general. So I don't know. It was just like, that was something I had to kind of call myself out on and realize that I was being a little bit toxic and jealous of other people having this like healthy relationship with their parents, or just jealous that their parents were like really interested in them. Not that mine aren't, but to be honest with you, no, to be honest, they're just not. Like they don't listen to this podcast. They probably won't listen to this episode. They don't even know when episodes come out. They don't like keep up with me or what I'm up to, which is totally fine. By the way, again, something that I've recently, at least especially in the last year, come to like accept. It used to really bother me, like I said, but I finally came to terms with like, these are the cards that you're dealt, Amber. And you're not going to change other people. And they are who they are. And you have to kind of meet them where they are. And it's hard when you compare your like family and parent relationships to other people's. It's like a bad thing to do, but we inherently do it. And so it was like, oh, why can't they be like so-and-so's mom? Why can't they be like this, you know? And it's because they're not. So that's definitely something I've been working on lately, is like seeing people for who they are, you know, and trying not to be like, well, they're like, someone else is like this, so why can't you be like that? But something that really hurt was when last time I went to Ohio, that was probably back in June. And when my dad was taking me to the airport to come back to Los Angeles, we were talking about like jobs and careers and passions and bullshit. And I had said something like, oh, well, like you thought it was a bad idea that I moved to California. Stupid you. This is like 9 months after I've been there. And I'm like, again, genuinely happy. I'm at a job that I like. I have friends. Like significantly, my life has gotten better. And he said, I still think it was a mistake. And I was like, I wish you wouldn't have said that. I wish you would not have said that. And I was like, it's one thing to like just not acknowledge and like be proud of me for doing this hard thing that made me really happy and doing it for myself. But it's another to like outwardly be like, it's a bad idea. It was a bad idea. There was a lot of times when I was like planning on moving out here where they were kind of like had this negative connotation about me coming out here. It was like, oh, she'll come back in a couple years. Oh, whatever. And I didn't care much for that either because it kind of was like, oh, you're going to fuck this up. Which with the attitude that I have, it works because that will give me fuel to say, you were wrong. Like that will give me the fuel to be like, yeah, remember when you said this? You were dead fucking wrong. So, but yeah, that shit's kind of fucking hard too. It's hard to do things for yourself in general. Like it was hard to just pick up and move to California and quit this stable job and give those things up for myself. You know, I want to be able to pay my rent and get a house one day and whatever. And I was giving up that security. But then to like actively not have the support of your parents sucks too. For sure. I remember the day that I left Ohio for California. I wasn't like at home. I wasn't like physically with them. I was at college and I was driving from college straight out to California. But I remember that morning like nothing other because obviously we got up early as shit and started driving. And no one from my family had like reached out. Like no one had said like, hey, you know, you're driving across the country today to move across the country and nobody knows when they'll see you next. Good luck, have fun, drive safe, you know. Nobody said anything. And I waited, like I was like actively waiting as I was driving till like 11 or noon or something like that, to where I was like, oh, maybe they're just like not up yet or haven't thought of me or whatever. And nobody said anything until I sent them like a photo or something and said something first. And, you know, and then they were like, oh, drive safe, you know, whatever. And it was like, I don't know. It felt very like, oh, like no one cares a little bit. I'm not saying that they didn't. And this episode is not like it's not like a bash my parents or anything, but this is like, these are my feelings and emotions. And I'm valid to have, you know, whatever fucking feelings that I have. But yeah, so that kind of sucked because at the same time, I remember I was in the car with one of the boys, my old roommate who I moved out here with. And I was driving and he had opened up this letter that his mom had written him, like a handwritten letter that was like 4 paragraphs long about how like, you know, she's so proud of him and she's going to miss him. And she's like up at night crying, writing this letter to him. And she's like hoping for the best and so proud of him and excited to see, you know, all the endeavors he's about to fucking do or whatever the fuck. And I'm like driving at this point as he's like reading it and he's like getting emotional. And I'm like, that jealousy thing comes right back up and is like, and obviously like, I want to be happy for my friends who have good relationships with their parents. Of course I want that for my fucking friends. Like, I don't want them to go through the shit that I, go through, you know, but it is a little bit of like that fucking jealousy thing that comes back up and is like, oh, like your parents would never write you that letter. Your parents didn't write you that letter. Your parents didn't even text you today. And it's like, I know it's like that part of your brain that's like, shut the fuck up. But that was hard too. And that was like something that really stuck with me for a while. Even a year later, I'm still fucking talking about it. Obviously in moments like that though, and when I do talk to my friends and open up about how I'm feeling, a lot of them, you know, it gives them an opportunity to be like, oh, like, and it reminds them how grateful they should be for their parents who do actively support them. Because, you know, if you have that consistent thing, you kind of forget that not everyone does. And that's kind of hard too. At least there's something like positive to come of it, I suppose. Of course, there's always like something you can take and learning and growing and all that bullshit. But so my unpopular opinion on family isn't everything. And I know that like that is such a controversial topic. And I run into quite a few people who like are, you know, family over everything. Family is the most important thing. And I suppose to an extent it is, but then if it is, I would argue, or at least I would ask what your definition of family is. For me, it's never been blood, because there have been a lot of like friends, family, like boyfriends even, that like I felt like were closer, were more like family to me than my own family was, if that makes sense. Like a lot of times, especially growing up, like I was really close with my friends, and I still am close to like some of my friends from middle school. And I think of them as family, and I would do anything for them equally as much as I would for my family, if not more, because they were there for me in that way that my parents or my family wasn't, if that makes sense. And don't get me wrong, like, we've done a lot of, me and my family have done a lot of like growing since, all of this. And I'm a lot closer to my siblings now than I was when I was younger. And we've kind of patched things over as far as like, we were not that close in childhood and it was a rough childhood too. But like, we're cool now. And now we bond over this exact topic of like kind of feeling like emotionally or mentally neglected. Which is nice. Like, it's amazing to have siblings. I can't imagine being an only child. I need those other people to understand what I'm going through. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you think there's nothing wrong with thinking family is everything, and if you have that family that's been there for you and it's really healthy and happy, then I can certainly understand that thought process. But for me, it was like just blood doesn't run that deep for me. Like it's really like how you treat me and how you talk to me and how you support me and how you, make me a better person and call me out on my shit and vice versa, And if you have someone in your family who isn't doing those things, they don't just get to be in your life because they're your family, And I'm not saying like I'm cutting anyone out or anything like that, but I think like it's important to evaluate like, what does someone bring to the table? We oftentimes talk about friends in terms of like, who you surround yourself with defines you, and they will shape you, which is true. Absolutely. If you're surrounded by people who are like unethical, immoral, and not super driven or ambitious, you're very unlikely to be morally, ethically great or ambitious and career driven or whatever. Like that's certainly true to an extent. But the same thing goes for your family. And I think that conversation does not come up as much is like, the whole like, your parents want you to go spend time with your uncle that you're not that close to, and they're not that great of a person. And you're like, why am I doing this? And they're like, 'cause it's family. And you're like, okay. To me, like, that's a valid question, is to be like, even your family, you have to take a step back and look and say like, what value does this person add to my life? Did they make me a better person? Did they make me a worse person? Did they influence me poorly? Do they influence me positively? Or do they challenge me, to become better? Do they, do they bring me up or they bring me down type of thing? Because there's no in between, really. Not with the people that you spend time with. There's no in between. People in your life are either making you better or making you worse. And of course, there's like a little bit of in between in certain avenues. But like for the most part, if you're spending a lot of time with someone, friend, partner, family, whatever, like, yeah, they're either influencing you positively or negatively, because they're absolutely influencing you. And you're doing that to other people too, which is something to think about. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that always comes up as like, I'll interact with someone who's like family is the most important thing. And I enjoy talking to them because I enjoy like kind of digging a little bit deeper into that topic. And it's also kind of a cultural thing too, which is understandable. It kind of goes along with the whole like respect your elders, respect your parents thing, which I understand, but unfortunately respect is a mutual thing. So in reality, there is no respect your elders. It's just respect other people, like in general. There is no scenario where you can respect your elder or your parent or whatever, and they don't respect you. That's not really respect at that point. It's kind of just like, I don't know, authoritarian. What the fuck did I just say? It's kind of like, that's a more like power struggle thing, like, that's a control thing. But respect has to go both ways. That's another kind of like unpopular opinion, is I don't really care much for the phrase like respect your elders or your parents because, well, for one, you don't know everyone else's situation. And so like when other people are like, oh, you don't like respect your parents, it's like, well, you don't know their parents and you don't know how their parents treated them. And there's quite a lot of circumstances where a parent probably does not deserve respect and vice versa. But you get the point. I mean, in reality, in order to be respected, you have to be a respectable person, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, if you're not being respected, you should probably take a look in the mirror and wonder, why are you behaving, as a person who deserves respect and whatever. Anyway, that's the shit we're working on this week is going to be like fostering your independence and knowing that you can do anything in life with or without your parents. I think that's quite an important lesson. And I'm really glad that with whatever childhood that I was brought up in, whatever relationship I had with my parents, that is an outcome that I had. I'm really grateful for that because you can do so much on your own. Like, seriously. Like, you are so fucking capable, like, of doing whatever the fuck you want. Career-wise, or like just straight up like picking up and moving, or just taking care of yourself, or just fucking like paying your own rent. You know what I mean? Like, you are absolutely capable of those things. And I'm not to say like don't utilize those things from your parents if you can. I'm still on my fucking parents' phone plan, of course. But like it's very calming and like kind of like it's like a pride moment for myself to know that like in the event that, let's say my parents didn't want me on the phone bill anymore, which is probably not going to happen, but like just theoretically, in the event that they were like, you got to get your own phone plan, whatever, it's very like, it's so, I don't even know what the fucking word is. I was going to say like cathartic, but that's probably not it, but maybe, but like relaxing or calming to know that I could do that for myself. I can, it's possible. Like, knowing that you can take care of yourself is insane. Like, I think I understand men who like being caretakers and like the idea of knowing they can take care of their family. I feel that way just about myself and my fucking dog. like I mean, I don't know. This is like a little bit off topic, but I do love the idea of like being able to financially take care of myself and my family one day. Because it's very like such a prideful thing. Like, you can feel so proud of yourself for knowing that you are independent enough to take care of you and your family and your kids and whatever, and that like, you don't need to rely on anyone else. That's a really amazing thing that I definitely think I got from my parents. Was that sense of independence. Definitely, like, I feel like my mom kind of integrated that into me because she had a circumstance where she was with her ex-husband and she wasn't working and it didn't work out and she was kind of like screwed or whatever. And so, she ingrained that in me that like, you're not going to you're not going to rely financially on a man. And it fucking worked because like, it does feel really good to be out here in California and know that like, I got myself out here. Like, I worked really hard to do that. I figured out like, even just growing up and like figuring out your own shit of like getting a fucking U-Haul across the fucking country, getting a lease in a different state for an apartment, like, just being able to figure out all that shit for yourself. I mean, just right now, paying my own rent, like paying my own electric bill and knowing that I do that for myself every fucking month. I take care of myself. I pay my own fucking grocery bill. I get my own gas. And I'm sure it's fucking wonderful to have someone else paying your bills. Do not get me wrong. It was wonderful back when my parents did it for me. That was amazing. And definitely don't give that up too early if you don't fucking have to. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying like it feels really good to know that you can take care of yourself. And that's a good takeaway from this episode is like at the end of the day, the very, very end, like all you really have is you. Like nobody has got you the way that you got you. Nobody gives a fuck about you in the way that you give a fuck about you. Nobody would do as much for you as you should and can and will do for yourself. And that includes your parents, that includes your partner, that includes your friends. And I'm not at all saying they don't care about you. I'm more so saying like, you have to be the number one person in your life. The world has to revolve around you. Your world has to revolve around you. And you can get a lot of shit done. And you're more than fucking capable. So that's the shit we're working on. Independent bitches, taking care of ourselves as we should. But yeah, and then my question for this week is going to be like, is your relationship with your family or your parents your responsibility? That's something I've been thinking about lately, especially, like I said, with this family drama that's arisen. Because obviously, since I was born, this was a parent-child relationship. And as the child, like, I didn't ask to start the relationship. I didn't ask to be born, that kind of thing. And I'm not saying I'm not grateful that I was. I'm just saying that's not something that I started. A parent decides to have a child. And that's a responsibility that you take on when you make that decision. And that's your responsibility. And I don't think that a kid owes their parents anything for just taking care of them in general. Like, and I'm not saying I'm ungrateful. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be grateful to your parents for the shit that they do for you. Of course you should be. But at the end of the day, like, you don't owe them that thank you either, because it was their decision to have a kid and it wasn't yours. And you don't owe them anything for being born. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that's kind of bothered me often too, is like when parents are like, oh, my kids are ungrateful. I put, clothes on your back, food on your table. That was the law. Like, like dead ass, if you didn't feed your kids, put clothes on their back and send them to school, you would get them taken away. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I do understand, yes, of course you want your kids to be grateful, but like at the same time, again, like that's the bare minimum we're talking about here. So that's another thing that's been on my mind, is like, especially as you get older, your relationship with your parents obviously changes and the dynamic is different. And it's kind of like, or even when you're a kid, like, and there's conflict between you and your parents, like, whose responsibility is it to mend that relationship? Is it both? Is it mutual? Is it just you? Is it just them? Personally, I think that would be my answer, was for the most part, it should fall on the parents' shoulders, because they're the ones who started and initiated the relationship. This is not a mutual relationship, This is not, a romantic relationship where you're mutuals and you're both actively choosing and deciding to be in the relationship. A parent-child relationship is completely different. The parent decided to start the relationship and have the child and whatever. The child did not. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you actively had a part or had a say or had a choice. And so I think that makes it a little bit different. But I'm very, very interested in what you guys have to say or any thoughts on that, because I don't know, just something I've been thinking about lately, because family is fucking hard. Like, this shit is fucking hard for everybody. We all have family shit. And I really debated making this episode, and I felt a little bit anxious, like, recording it and releasing it. And I thought a lot about, like, what do I want to say and what do I not want to say, and what should I not put on the internet and whatever. And maybe I just should scrap the whole episode and not talk about it. But and to an extent, I think when you have like a bit of a broken family, you're a little like embarrassed. I don't know, like you feel a little bit like, yeah, you feel a little bit embarrassed. I mean, not a broken family, but just like, one that's going through some shit. But to be honest with you, all families go through shit. So that's nothing to fret about. And if you kind of relate a little bit and you feel like maybe my parents, you kind of feel like also your parents maybe didn't give you that mental or emotional support, I'm right there with you. So at least at the end of the day, I made this video and made maybe one person feel a little bit less alone about that. Or just anyone feeling less alone about, like, yeah, we all have fucking family bullshit that we have to deal with, and it fucking sucks and it's stressful and it's like been eating up my week. And like, to be honest with you, I'm surprised I even recorded this video, because I sat down to record it yesterday and then some family stuff came up and I like couldn't even sit down and focus on myself because I was just like stressed out of my mind. And then I thought, you know what, I can turn this into something good. Hopefully there's like a positive outcome of like someone listens to this episode and feels a little bit less alone and a little bit more like, I'm not crazy. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Like, family's fucking hard. Shit's fucking hard. It is. Any way you spin it, for everyone involved too. So that's what I got for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you want to see more of me, you can follow my TikTok at Amber Meisner, my Instagram at Amber Meisner with 2 R's. And I will see you on the next one, because this shit is hard.